Hey guys! Today I'm just going to get right into it really quick because I'm super socially awkward and I hate recording videos. So here we go. I read the book Wolves in the Land of Salmon by David Makowski, and it focuses on his journeys tracking wolves on the West Coast. So Northern California, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, Canada, and certain islands along the coast as well. It starts off with him talking about his childhood and how he became super interested in science as a kid. His mother introduced him to inquiry and questioning because she was a scientist herself, and this was around him being like 12 years old. So he jumped into his teens and they moved from Ohio to California. When he was in California, he really started becoming interested in wolves because of the way that humans connect with them and their meaning and everything that kind of align with what a wolf stands for. So power and bravery and strength. He then goes on to explain how he wanted to start tracking them and finding the reason on why we feel like they're important in our life and seeing them in their natural habitat. So he started tracking wolves. But before all of this, he just gives you a list of basic facts about wolves. So, how male and female wolves are about 90 to 80 pounds. They are about waist high on the average height of a human, and they're extremely sociable, intelligent animals that are really adaptable. And if you wonder why I'm looking over there, that's because I have my notes to make sure that I don't skip anything. So he makes it known that the number of wolves in the wild in the United States is declining. The state of Oregon and Washington both only have about 30 left in the wild because of an increase of population into the states and urban areas growing, and so it's harder for them to survive out there. He then starts getting into the connection between wolves and salmon, and it's because of the rivers, and it's the Columbia and the Fraser rivers that run through the northern parts of the United States up there, and their impact on the survival of those animals. So he starts off with his tracking, explaining when he went to South Africa, and his goal was to just track and learn how to properly find them in the wild. And it was important for him because it was him finally understanding the science behind it, for him to be able to go out and do it on his own. So he starts talking about that experience, and from there he goes into his own personal experience of him taking people out. So he taught a class with Marcus Rennerison. I don't really know how to say his last name, but that's okay. And that was in Washington, and they took a class out into the wild and taught them how to track wolves themselves. So this was the first experience that he's bringing to the audience about him tracking wolves. He says that they were using footprints and plants nearby to be able to identify if they would be there, and then they were looking for scat with certain food in it, knowing that it would be a wolf or not. He looked at other animals like elk, because elk are one of those primary sources that wolves can follow for maybe food or survival. And so he believes that if he did all of this, he would be able to find wolves, and he did, and he was able to show the class something that he had loved. So the reasoning, and then he goes into the reasoning behind why he does personally love wolves, is because he feels like they can kind of give us a light into the modern world and how we could fix a lot of the problems. He believes that they're a lot smarter than humans realize, and that we need to look at them and the way that they live their lives and their freedom and their intelligence and go from there. So he goes on to explain the Northern Cascades, which is where he does most of his exploring and his tracking. So he gives you a map within the book, and you can look through it to see what's going on. And from there he goes on to explain the mountains. So he traveled with a guy named Brandon Shelley, and they walked through months at a time the Metho Valley, which are high peaks, and then the Sawtooth Range and Cascade Crest. So those were the main areas that they walked through. And the reasoning behind that it was so important was because the wolves were taking them into areas that neither one of them had ever been to before, and most people hadn't as well. And these wolves are the ones that are discovering these places basically and getting to enjoy their beauty and their the amazing nature that it is. And in order for us to find those places, we have to follow these animals. So David really thought that was an important message for him personally. So then he again starts getting into the connection with salmon because they wanted to see if salmon would attract wolves. So they go down to the river and they put fish spawn and fish carcasses into the river to see if it increases wolves to come down, and it does, but it also increases the life of juvenile salmon because the wolves are not wanting to eat the juvenile salmon, they want the spawn or the carcass. Sorry, I got a text. So he then goes into the next importance of wolves, which are the Hazomene wolves. These are the wolves that are in the mountain range of the Hazomene Mountains. They are in a reservoir near Washington, and the reason that they were important to him is because they resembled the attitudes and the kind of movements of black bears. They mainly ate salmon. They would their scat would have bear fur in it, so they knew that they were eating black bears if their carcasses were just laying there, or if there was a pack of wolves and they were killing it together. And that was a big question that they didn't know. So they went to Ross Lake, and he has a bunch of photos within the book to explain, where they were and what he's trying to get across. But they're showing the similarities that the wolves and the bears have. So they both do beach combing, they both eat salmon, they're both hibernating in certain areas if it's really, really cold, and they're both traveling in, families. Bears not so much, but wolves definitely more. So he talks about all of these different tracking experiences and all of these different trails throughout the entire book. There's probably 20 in there, and they're all about the same, just like different versions of the story. So he goes on to do that, and by the end of the book, he explains the importance of the salmon and how it connects to the wolves, but the focus is really on the wolves. He feels like people's opinions are similar to a wolf's reactions, and he thinks that the reason that we look at wolves as someone that has strength, power, and bravery is because those are the qualities that we want in our life and ourselves. So we look at the wolves as an idolized thing. And he thinks if we're doing this and as an idolization, as an animal representation, especially in Native American culture, then we should be using the way of their life and the way that they do certain things to influence us in our daily life. And they completely take over his life and explain to him how important being present and being there in nature is. He goes to British Columbia and he finds a certain wolf, and it's an inspirational moment for him because it's just him and this wolf, and it's in a really quiet moment. And it's towards the end of the book, and he posts a picture in the book of this wolf, which was a small black wolf. And the book it was interesting because I was trying to connect it to what we did in our class, but I wasn't able to do much of that because we didn't look for animals. But I guess I could say I understood what he wanted by experiencing the outdoors, and the connection that he had with his, the wolves, and what he wanted was similar to what we did, where we were just trying to do something to find a connection with nature. All right. I am now over 9 minutes, so that was my book video presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I know a lot more about wolves than I ever thought I did. All right, thanks guys. Bye.